I have been very clear about what you call odious debt. We have a very unique position. And I said, if this government continues to pay debt that is not legal, we are going to default. And they continue to do so. And that default is of their own making. Today, I will not blame the previous regime, I will blame this regime. It is of their own making. They have chosen this path of self-destruction. And that destruction means we are also going to get destroyed. But I want to tell them this, because this reality is coming. And this pain that is going to come to us, we are not going to accept or believe that they are the ones who are now going to be capable of taking us out of it. We will not. Ghana is probably the only country where a head of state has survived in power out of default. And he survived only because he has 2 years, he has elections this year. He pleaded to try and exit with some honor. But every other country, they are removed. Even here, that is coming. And I say it is their conscious decision, a decision they have made themselves, that we will pay this odious debt and will continue sinking Kenya.
You've said something, and if you just make a linkage, and Kenya could default or headed down the road of default, and the reason for this is because Kenya is paying illegal debts.
Correct.
Okay. Now, it seems as though you've been saying these things over and over again. Over the weekend, CS for Lands, Alice Wahome, said a number of things. I don't know, were you in Nyeri when she was, were you there?
I was with her in Kiambu, in Kino, Kikuyu constituency on Friday.
Okay, on Friday. And then she said, Jimi Wanjigi, keep doing what you're doing.
Yes.
You know, we hear you. Continue doing what you're doing. It sounded as though, you know, you can be in your corner saying what you need to say, but we're going to continue doing it because you're keeping people righteous. But what you're saying is beyond just holding a bullhorn in a crowd somewhere and hoping somebody pays attention. But we're talking about serious stuff here that could essentially sink this nation. So it's not a matter of keep doing what you're doing and somebody patting you on the back and saying, okay, keep people righteous, but saying you actually look at what you've been doing, stop what you're doing, otherwise Kenya is going to the dogs.
Let me assure you of something here, and really I don't see in all essence how we are such a unique country that every country that has reached this stage where you have all your revenue, literally almost all your revenue going to pay debt, has had to default. But Kenya is so special. Somehow we are so special, we are going to avoid it. Right? And that default is extremely painful. Now, we have sung this for over 1 year, that this is the danger ahead. And it's because you are paying this debt. They have refused to listen. So they are consciously taking us to that situation of collapse. They are, in fact, with a lot of zeal, making sure that they come and cause us even more pain by taking more and more of our money in taxation, frustrating every business you can think of, every producer you can think of, right? To pay this odious debt, this illegal debt, and still collapsing us. They are making that conscious decision. Now, I want to tell you something. We will give them no time because we are getting there. I can tell you here, we will give them no time to imagine that we believe they can get us out of it.
So what will you do?
Oh, no government, I'm telling you here, other than Ghana the other day, stays in power. And you will remember this. You know, these are extraordinary circumstances, City. Extraordinary circumstances in this country. We have never been here before.
No, we haven't.
And I can tell you, this government has refused to rise up, as Ndu is saying, to these extraordinary times.
Is it capable?
And make difficult decisions.
Is it capable?
No, it is not. It is not.
What would happen if we refuse to pay the odious debt?
What immediately happens, and I was suggesting this to somebody I was with from government a few days ago, what immediately happens is the following, is that you say we can afford to pay what is not odious. That one, put it aside, we are going to pay it. But we need to audit it. Because as I also have said from before, we are clearly, in my view, have overpaid this debt. So we need to have checks and balances on this, our figures. So we need to say what is legitimate, pass through our parliament, is in our budget, we shall pay. What is odious, we put aside. And investigate its payments and declare it odious. Now, what will happen is that you have a crisis, but for a much shorter period. With a decisive leadership, within a matter of no more than 6 months, this matter will be sorted out for most Kenyans. But we don't have a decisive leadership. We have a leadership that is frightened to make this decision. We have a leadership that is captured by interests of this odious debt. We have a leadership that has refused to rise up to the occasion of these extraordinary circumstances.
Let me ask another question, Jimmy. What percentage of our debts is comprised of the odious debt?
In our view,
yes,
70%.
Hey.
Oh, Jimmy.
Yes.
7 trillion shillings.
70%, yes. Let me update you. Let me update you. When we started screaming about debt,
it was 9
it was at 8.4. July 2022. Today, January, it is at 11 trillion. Even after paying 1.9 trillion, 1.3 up to 1.3, 1.4 up to July, August, and another 500 between then and now. So we paid about 2 trillion, and it is now at 11. A lot of that is because of loss of exchange. All right? I think you have a trillion something because of loss of exchange. And that is not going to change. No, but you can see the trajectory keeps going like this. And yet we are still being taxed. And yet it is chewing more and more of our revenue as a percentage of its return.
Your estimation is that 70% of that 11 trillion is odious debt.
Remember,
odious debt is debt that is taken without the authority of the sovereign, the people.
And I'm trying to combine it with interest and very many things. I think you, when I was last here, I gave a very clear figure of what is deficit, which is debt. I told you we had done the accounts of the country. So you take our revenue. How much revenue had we collected, tax revenue actuals, over the last 10 years? It was 13.3 trillion. What was our expenditure? Our expenditure, we categorized this way over the last 10 years. This is up to June 2023. We categorized this way. Development was 6 trillion. What was the county expenditure? Over 10 years. What were the salaries over 10 years? What were the operations? What were the pensions over 10 years? We removed debt payments. And that came to 14.6 trillion. So our deficit was about 1.2, 1.3 trillion over 10 years. Do you know how much we borrowed? 7.7 trillion.
For what?
6.5 trillion above what was required, which is like 60 years worth of debt in advance that we pay today. It was not needed. That is the odious debt. What was it needed for? What did it fund? It didn't fund any shortfall that we had. So what was it? Now, there's no way we can pay it. There's no way we can ever pay it.
But the journey for refusal to pay this debt that has been incurred to by the government to whoever has lent us the money has to start somewhere.
Yes.
Has to start by looking at, first, was it legally acquired?
Correct.
Through legal instruments?
Correct.
So were there legal instruments that were breached in the acquisition of this debt?
Absolutely. There were legal instruments that were continually breached.
Which?
It was not in the budget. It was never passed by parliament. It was never in the appropriations bill, which is the budget. It never went as a line item to be expended for any project in this country because you can only borrow for development. In the short term, you can borrow from the overdraft and bills, which are 1 year.
Yep.
Full stop. Right? So these bonds, for example, that the banks have given the government, what project did they fund? Because they are medium term to long term. What have they funded? Nothing. They don't exist. What did the Eurobond fund? Show me where it is a line item in the budget. We came here and we explained to you and showed you what SGR was about.
So the instruments that we use to ascertain all these things, Jimmy, number one would be the budget making process, and this is
the
Parliament.
The law.
Okay.
The law.
If it has not gone through Parliament, then it has. This is an expenditure that has been made without the authority of the sovereign.
Correct.
Through their representatives in Parliament.
Correct.
Then number two, lack of tracking that this has gone to the benefit of the people would be the Auditor General's reports.
Correct.
That would highlight that I do not see
what it was expended for.
Where this money has gone to.
Correct.
Do we have those corresponding reports from the Auditor General that actually show there's a 6 trillion shillings here that has not gone to be expended in accordance with the law? That then can be used to say this is odious debt. Or do we just use our own calculations?
No, I can assure you these were their records that we have looked at.
Whose
and
records?
all we removed, the budget, the Treasury records and the Auditor General. All we have removed is debt payments. Remove all the debt payments. That's all. And that is the figure. And what we have done is something very unique. It's called a forensic audit. A forensic audit is not just a sabu. It is to look at the law and where it has been flouted. You look at every expenditure in relation to the law, the Constitution. I'll give you an example, because we've done it also with the housing levy, which is a very current debate. Right? You tell me where Parliament has approved the housing levy, Article 220(221) of the Constitution, which says expenditure and revenue estimates. Show me the revenue or expenditure estimates of the housing levy. It doesn't exist. Show me in the appropriations bill where the housing levy is there. It doesn't exist. Show me in the Ministry of Housing where there's a line item called low-cost housing development. Doesn't exist. Does not exist. The only place housing levy exists is in the finance bill.
Is in the collection.
As a levy in the collection. But to be spent on what? Estimated on what? There's not even an estimate. In the revenue estimate, they should have done, we expect to collect so much. Like now, fuel levy, it is there. It does not exist. So this government is perpetuating the things of the past. Are you telling me that it is legal? It is not. A judge called Majanja even gets rights and says, okay, they didn't put the revenue estimates, but it's in the appropriation bill, and even quotes the appropriation bill. Where? Which appropriation? The one he's quoted, it doesn't exist. It does not exist.